I was 34 the week I learned exactly what my parents thought my childhood home was worth to them. $60,000. That's the number. Remember it because it comes back. Welcome back to Wise Dad Tales, the channel where quiet people keep the receipts and family learns that boundaries have a price. If stories about dignity, documents, and consequences are your thing, drop a comment and subscribe, because this one has all three. I am a forensic accountant. That means, for a living, I take a set of numbers that don't add up and I find out why. I trace where money actually went, not where someone says it went. I have spent 14 years learning that people tell the truth about their priorities with their bank statements, never with their mouths. I tell you that first because it matters later. Everything in this story eventually became a document to me. That is not a metaphor. That is a professional habit, and it is the only reason I am standing here instead of still sitting in my parents' dining room, quietly absorbing what they'd decided I deserved. My husband, Daniel, likes to say I fell in love with him because he balanced his checkbook by hand, out of habit, even though the bank did it for him automatically. He wasn't wrong. We built a small, careful life together. A townhouse we were saving to buy outright. A dog named Pretzel who ate our couch cushions one at a time, methodically, like he had a schedule. We didn't need much. We just needed things to be fair. My family did not run on fairness. My family ran on an arithmetic nobody wrote down, but everyone understood. My younger brother, Grant, was the one who needed help. I was the one who managed fine. And manages fine became, over 3 decades, a quiet sentence that meant, she will not need anything, so give it to him. I paid for my own college. Grant's tuition gap got covered, twice, no forms to fill out. I drove 4 hours each way, every other weekend, when my mother had her hip replaced, meal prep, medication schedules, the whole rotation alone, while Grant sent a fruit basket. I organized my father's small business ledger for free every tax season for 9 years, because you're so good with numbers, honey, and Grant has enough on his plate. Somewhere in there I stopped being a daughter with needs and became a resource with a skill set. I didn't fully see it. That's what family arithmetic does. It hides the balance sheet from the person paying into it. My grandmother saw it, though. Nana lived 2 streets over from my parents for the last 11 years of her life, and she was the only person in that family who ever looked at me like the ledger was visible to her. She used to say, over coffee, "You are the load-bearing wall in this family, and nobody thinks a wall." I laughed it off for years. I wish I'd written it down sooner. Eventually I did. Continued below in part 3. The betrayal, when it came, arrived on a Tuesday, in a phone call that lasted 4 minutes, and my mother's voice had the particular brightness she uses when she already knows something is wrong and has decided to be cheerful about it anyway. Grant and Melissa found a house, she said. 3-bedroom, good school district. Your father and I are giving them the down payment. $60,000. We already wired it Friday. I asked, because I am the kind of person who asks, whether there was a plan for me and Daniel, since we were still saving toward our own place at the time. Oh, honey, she said, you two are so responsible. You'll be fine renting a little longer. Grant needs the push. You've never needed pushing. Friday. She said Friday. The money had already moved 4 days before she told me. That detail sat in my chest like a stone the second I heard it, though I said nothing on the call except that I understood. I did not cry. I did what I do at work when a number looks wrong. I opened a spreadsheet. I am not proud of how methodically I began collecting things that night, and I am not ashamed of it either. I saved the voicemail where my mother explained the wire. I screenshotted the text Grant sent our family group chat 2 days later, a photo of a champagne bottle on a granite countertop, captioned, "Thanks Mom and Dad, couldn't have done it without you." Timestamped at 6:47 p.m., the same day I'd texted my mother asking if she had a minute to talk about a savings account Nana had once mentioned setting up for me. She never answered that text. She liked Grant's photo within the hour. I printed both. I put them in a folder. I did not know yet what the folder was for. I only knew that a wall doesn't get thanked, and a wall remembers being told to hold up the house anyway. Nana died 11 weeks later, in her sleep, the week after Thanksgiving. I had been the one sitting with her most Sunday afternoons that autumn, the one who noticed her breathing had changed and got her to the cardiologist twice before anyone else registered it as a pattern. I don't say that as a resume line. I say it because it's what happened, and I have learned that what happened is the only thing worth saying out loud. Her attorney called 10 days after the funeral and asked the whole family, my parents, Grant, Melissa, and me, to come to his office on a Thursday morning for the reading of the will. Everyone dressed like it was a formality. My mother wore the blazer she wears to things she expects to be brief. It was not brief. Nana's estate attorney, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Okafor who had drafted 3 separate versions of her will over the years and clearly enjoyed none of them more than the last, read through the boilerplate quickly. The house to be sold and proceeds split among her 3 grandchildren equally. That part surprised no one, and then he reached a paragraph he read slowly. The way you read something you know is about to change the temperature of a room. Nana had established a payable on death account 8 years earlier, funded gradually and quietly with money my grandfather's pension had left behind. $141,000. Naming a single beneficiary. Me. My mother's face did something I had genuinely never seen it do before, a kind of stillness that wasn't grace, it was recalibration. Grant said, "That has to be a mistake," which is a strange thing to say about a legally executed financial instrument, but I understood the impulse. He was not talking to Mr. Okafor. He was talking to a version of the world where the arithmetic still made sense. Mr. Okafor said it was not a mistake, and then he did the thing that made the whole room go quiet in a different way. He slid a sealed envelope across the table toward me. "Your grandmother left a letter with the account paperwork," he said. "She asked me to give it to you privately, but she also said, and I'm quoting her directly, if they're all in the room, let them watch her open it." I read it there. I have read it perhaps 200 times since. It is 4 sentences. I am only going to read you one, because the rest belongs to me. You have spent your whole life being the numbers that made everyone else's math work. I am not leaving you money. I am leaving you the difference. I folded the letter along its original crease and put it back in the envelope. I said thank you to Mr. Okafor. I did not say anything else in that room. I went home, and I read everything 3 times, the account documents, the will, the letter, because that is what you do with evidence. You do not react to it. You confirm it is real, and then you understand exactly what it means before you decide what to do with the knowledge that it exists. There was a second, smaller document folded into the same envelope that I almost missed. A single sheet, handwritten, dated 4 years earlier. A record, Nana's own ledger, in her looping handwriting of every gift she had personally given each of her 3 grandchildren since 1998. Birthdays, graduations, emergencies. Grant's column ran to 11 entries. Mine ran to 3. At the bottom, in the same pen, she'd written, "I kept this because someday someone in this family would need to be believed, and I was tired of being the only one who remembered." That ledger became the anchor. I did not know, sitting at my kitchen table that night with Pretzel's head on my foot, that I would carry it into a living room 17 days later and lay it on a coffee table like a verdict. I only knew I was never going to be the one absorbing the difference again. My mother called 4 days after the reading, and her opening line was, so obviously, that money should really be thought of as a family resource. I asked her what she meant by family resource, because I am the kind of person who makes people define their terms. She said Grant and Melissa's mortgage rate had come in higher than expected, and that Nana would have wanted the family taken care of, and that it wasn't really fair for one grandchild to end up with so much more than the others, given that the house sale would already be split 3 ways. I noted, quietly, that she had used the word fair in a sentence about my inheritance 4 days after describing $60,000 of my parents' own money, given to Grant alone, as simply the push he needed. I did not say this out loud. I wrote it down. Forensic accountants do not argue with someone's math in real time. We wait until we have the full ledger, and then we present it once. Grant showed up at my house the following Saturday, unannounced, holding a six-pack of the beer I like, which is the kind of gesture that would have worked on me 18 months earlier. He sat at my kitchen table and told me that Melissa was stressed about the closing costs, that he wasn't trying to take anything, that he just thought, as a family, we should be splitting what's fair. Since Nana obviously didn't think it through when she wrote that will years ago, she probably would have updated it. I asked him one question. When did Nana ever, in her life, not think something through? He didn't have an answer. He drank his beer instead. I let the silence sit exactly as long as it needed to. That night I called my attorney, a woman named Priyachan who has handled 2 small trust disputes for clients of mine over the years and has never once raised her voice in a conversation I've been part of. I told her I wanted everything documented and I wanted a formal letter sent to the estate confirming the account was mine outright, no informal family arrangement attached, nothing verbal, nothing implied. Send the letters, I told her. She said she already had a draft ready because she'd read the tone of my first email correctly. I liked her immediately for the same reason I like well-kept books. No surprises hiding in the footnotes. If you've ever watched people who couldn't spare you one afternoon suddenly find all the time in the world the moment money is involved, you already know exactly where this story goes. Stick around because the folder isn't done growing yet. My mother called it a housewarming for Grant and Melissa's new place, 3 weeks after the closing. I understood immediately it was not a housewarming. It was a hearing, and I had been quietly appointed the defendant. I brought the folder anyway. I brought Nana's ledger. I brought copies of the wire confirmation my mother had once left visible on her own kitchen counter, and I'd photographed without thinking much of it at the time. I brought the letter in its envelope, in the inside pocket of my jacket, against my ribs, the whole drive there. There were 9 people in that living room by the time my father stood up with a glass of wine he'd barely touched and said he wanted to say a few words about family and generosity. He talked about how proud he was of Grant for stepping up and buying a home, how family means showing up for each other when it counts, and then, turning slightly, not quite looking at me, he said that some of us have been blessed more than others lately. And real family finds a way to even things out. The room turned to me on cue, like it had been rehearsed, because it had been. I asked if I could say something. My father, visibly relieved, gestured for me to stand, the way you gesture for someone you believe is about to surrender. I did not raise my voice. I have never once raised my voice in that house, and I was not going to start in a house I hadn't been offered $1 toward. I said that I wanted to talk about arithmetic, since my father had brought up evening things out. I took out the wire confirmation first and read the date on it aloud, the Friday it was sent, for full days before my mother told me about it on the phone, the same week she'd called Daniel and me so responsible for still renting. Nobody said anything. I set it on the coffee table. I took out Nana's ledger next. I read the totals. 11 entries for Grant. 3 for me. I read her note at the bottom, in her own handwriting, about being tired of being the only one who remembered. My mother's face did the recalibrating stillness again. Grant said, quietly this time, she didn't mean it like that, and I said that I hadn't written it, so he was welcome to take it up with the person who had, and everyone in that room understood exactly who that would require. The room's temperature moved through its stages the way it always does. Soft confusion first. Then my mother, emotional, saying I was turning a happy day into a courtroom. Then my father, louder, saying I was punishing the whole family for one woman's opinion. Then, briefly, silence, the real kind, the kind where people realize the numbers in front of them are not opinions at all. I answered each escalation the same way. Quieter. I told my mother that a courtroom is exactly what a family becomes when its finances only get discussed in the rooms where I'm expected to give something up. I told my father that Nana's opinion was a legally executed financial instrument reviewed by an attorney, and that the word he was looking for wasn't opinion. It was will. Melissa, who had said almost nothing all night, quietly excused herself to the kitchen at that point, and I saw her hand shake slightly around her wine glass on the way out. I acknowledged it with a small nod when she glanced back at me from the doorway. It didn't change anything. It didn't need to. Not everyone in a room like that owes you an apology on the spot. Some of them just owe you the truth on their face, and hers was the only honest one all evening. Last, I took out the envelope with Nana's letter, and I read them the single sentence I'll read you now, because I think it deserves to live outside my kitchen. I am not leaving you money. I am leaving you the difference. I laid the envelope on the coffee table, on top of the wire confirmation, on top of the ledger, and I let it sit there. Nobody reached for it. Nobody needed to. Everyone in that room already knew exactly what it added up to. I told them I loved them and that I would always show up if any of them were sick or scared or genuinely in trouble, the way I always had, but that I would not be subsidizing a house I was never offered $1 toward, and that the account was staying exactly where Nana had put it. Then I said the only closing line I'd prepared, the only one I needed. You spent 30 years telling me I didn't need anything. Turns out I didn't need your permission either. I picked up my folder, left the envelope where it was, and drove home with the windows down the whole way, saying nothing to Daniel until we were both sitting on our own front step with pretzel between us. The account stayed mine. $141,000, untouched by any family resource conversation ever again. My attorney's letter closed the matter formally within a month. There was no lawsuit, because there was nothing left to litigate once the paperwork was on the table in front of 9 witnesses. My parents never brought it up directly again, though the calls thinned out considerably for a while, which told me everything about what those calls had actually been for. Grant and Melissa kept the house. I don't begrudge them the house. I begrudge the 4 days my mother waited before telling me the wire had gone out, and I've made my peace with the fact that those two things are not the same and never will be. Grant reached out on his own, without our parents, about 5 months later, no ask attached, just an actual conversation, the first one we'd had in years that wasn't about money. I don't know yet what that becomes. I know it's the only version of him I'm interested in keeping around. The envelope stayed on that coffee table for exactly as long as it took everyone to leave the room. Melissa told me later she was the one who eventually picked it up and mailed it back to me, unopened again, in a plain white envelope with no note. I keep it now in the same drawer as Nana's ledger, not because I need to keep rereading it, but because some documents are worth keeping simply as proof that a thing was said and meant and true. I used part of the money to finish paying off our townhouse outright, the thing Daniel and I had been quietly building toward the whole time nobody thought to ask what we needed. I used another part to fund a scholarship at the community college where Nana took night classes in her 50s, after my grandfather died, back when everyone in the family called it cute that she wanted a degree at that age. It's a small scholarship. It goes to a non-traditional student every year, someone starting over later than people expect them to. I didn't tell anyone in my family I'd done it. I don't need them to know. I needed her to have mattered on paper, the same way she made sure I would. I don't think of any of this as revenge, and I'd ask you not to either. Revenge is something you do to make someone else feel what you felt. All I did was stop paying a debt I never actually agreed to carry, and let the paperwork say so, in writing, the way every honest transaction eventually has to. A family that only balances its books when someone finally shows them the ledger was never balanced to begin with. It was just waiting for someone patient enough to add it all up. If this reminded you that quiet people keep the receipts, and that boundaries are allowed even with blood, take that as your sign. Update what needs updating. Tell someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.